Another day, another dystopian story from the United Kingdom. Let's listen to one young man who called in to tell me that the school banned him from reading his Bible because it made other students uncomfortable. Let's listen.
Hi, Brad. I'm from the UK and my name is Joe. This happened a year or two ago when I was in sixth form, which is essentially the equivalent of the end of high school here. Um, so I'm a Christian and I used to wear a crucifix and I would read my Bible in the morning, during our free time. And they pulled me into the office and they told me that my reading of the Bible and my visibly wearing a crucifix could pose some, and I quote, emotional distress to students of other or no faith. Um, Unfortunately, I didn't push back on this because I was a bit of a doormat at the time. I did refuse to take my crucifix off, but I relented and I said I would stop bringing my Bible in. Which now I think back on it is kind of insane, um, given that this was a majority Christian school in the UK, which is majority Christian, and I do just think that, like, I want to get your thoughts on this. Is this as insane as I think it was? Because it wasn't like they were banning all religious artifacts. Like there were students with like hijabs and even burqas.
Not my jaw dropping at the last part. You're telling me that a Bible makes people unsafe, but not Islamic garb. To be clear, I do think people should be allowed to do both. But if one of those is like more likely to legitimately make LGBTQ students feel unsafe or something, it isn't the Bible, okay? If we're just being so for real. Not shading all Muslims. I know there's a diversity of beliefs, but I'm just saying, in general, one of these religions is more hostile than the other. Not in all cases, not all people, but y'all know what I'm saying. So that's incredibly ironic and hypocritical to me. But also, the answer to your question is yes. This is exactly as insane as you think it is. In fact, it's probably worse. It seems worse to us than it even does to you because it's hard to understand how just crazy something is when you're in the middle of it. It almost seems normalized to some extent. And unfortunately, you're in the context of the United Kingdom where people are going to jail over tweets now, and they're investigating people every single day over posts on social media. So in many ways, I do think the United Kingdom has fallen when it comes to freedom of speech, freedom of religion. They are imprisoning people for silently praying. It is, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being hyperbolic. It is kind of dystopian. It's kind of Orwellian. And to me, it's such a important reminder of why the First Amendment is a non-negotiable, why we've got to stand up and stick up for it, no matter who's trying to chip away at it. And we have to be pretty hardcore absolutists on it. Because in the United States, if this situation happened, you would actually have legal recourse. You could sue your school, and they would be violating the law by doing this to you. In the United Kingdom, I have no idea. They might actually be allowed to do it, but it doesn't make it right. I mean, freedom, I'm not a particularly religious person, but freedom of religion is a human right. And in the United States, it's a constitutional right, but they are violating your human rights by stopping you from practicing your religion in ways that hurt no one else and affect no one else. Like you wearing a cross or you reading a book doesn't hurt anyone. It doesn't infringe on anyone else's rights. It's just you expressing your own faith in public, out loud, or even in your head in the case of reading a book. That's allowed. That's your right. And by stopping you from doing that, they're violating your rights, your human rights, especially. And again, they're sending this bogus message that, oh, ideas or words or beliefs make people unsafe or uncomfortable. You do not have a right to comfort, folks. Life is not comfortable. So stop teaching young people, high schoolers, that they have the right to feel comfortable at all times. No, teach them that sometimes in the real world, you have to coexist with people who have beliefs that might offend you, who believe or have values that you strongly disagree with. And as long as they're not directly infringing your rights or harming you, you have to cope. Part of being an adult is coping. And I can mostly speak to the US, but I imagine something pretty similar is happening overseas across the pond. People don't know how to cope anymore. They just constantly want to play the victim and melt down and act like they're entitled to some kind of safe space. You're entitled to nothing except not having your rights violated or not being harmed by someone else. You are not entitled to not be in the same space as somebody reading a book that might hurt your feelings. Then don't read it. Then look somewhere else. It's not that hard. It's not that deep. I'm sorry you had to deal with this. But also, don't beat yourself up too much for the fact that you didn't take a bigger stand. You were a teenager, okay? And maybe you could have, maybe you should have, but like, it's normal as a 16, 17-year-old, whatever, to not want to rock the boat, to not want to be the controversial kid, to succumb to social pressure. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you a bad guy. But hopefully in your adult life, if you encounter a situation like this, you will stand up for yourself and your beliefs more forcefully. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. And remember to hit the like button while you're at it. Make sure you're subscribed. Plus, the link is in the description to send in voice notes with your woke horror stories for me to potentially listen to on an upcoming show. Up next, we've got another story about weaponized, bogus claims of racism. Let's take a listen.
Hey, Brad. So I used to manage a sandwich shop up in First Hill, Seattle, and I had a woman come in one time, ordered about 10 minutes before we closed, and came 10 minutes after we closed. I had already locked the door. I had already closed everything down. It was a slow afternoon, and now I was getting ready to leave. But I'm like, okay, she had already paid online. She ordered her sandwich, so I'll let her in, give her a sandwich, whatever. She comes in, decides it's not fresh enough, and tells me that I'm going to remake it for her, or she's not going to leave.
Oh?
I explained I wasn't going to do that, but I'd be happy to refund it. Nope, you're going to remake my sandwich, and refuse to leave till I had to call the police and have them finally arrest her because she refused to leave even when the police got there. The whole time screaming I was racist because she was black and I was white, and this was all about racism. Meanwhile, no store in their right mind is going to do that. Turn the ovens back on, open everything back up because somebody wants something remade after they arrived late. This is very typical of this entitlement that is just growing and growing in certain communities where if you don't get your way, it's because of racism. And immediately, that's what everyone goes to. Anyway, your thoughts?
Yeah, I hear stories like this all the time, and it's a shame because, actual racism is evil, right? And I'm sure it still does happen to some extent in this country where people are treated wrongly or unfairly because of their skin color, their race, their ethnicity, what have you, and that's really wrong. We should never be treating people differently because of things they can't control or change about themselves. It's not kind, it's not fair, and in many cases it is also illegal. But the weaponization of it is kind of out of control to me. I really do believe that people have realized that maybe in 2020, 2021, they could just invoke racism and then always get their way. But thankfully, people seem to be like getting fed up with it, because I come back to this theme a lot, but I really do believe that we've had a bit of a boy who cried wolf problem in society where they overuse these terms: racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, blah, 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 and just threw them around like candy on Halloween about anything they didn't like or anytime people wanted to get their way. And it wasn't just actual members of these groups doing it. It was also their like woke white allies as well. And those words started to lose their power. So now I do actually think we've seen a resurgence in some genuine bigotry, which I don't support and am really dismayed to see. But it's like, what did you expect when people started abusing the system in such a widespread manner? I think you did absolutely nothing wrong based on your telling of the story. I mean, it was nice of you to even serve her. If she got there 10 minutes after you closed and the door was locked and you were gone, she wouldn't really be entitled to anything other than maybe a refund, but you offered her that. So she has no complaints. She has no right to make you fire back up the ovens and reopen the store after it's closed. The entitlement is out of control. And also good for you for calling the police, because some people don't want to call the police on a black person because they feel like, especially in these liberal bubbles, like I think you said, Seattle, they've been told that's problematic. And of course it is if you're doing it unfairly, but if there's actually a crime happening or a reason to, you should call the police, whether it's a white person, a black person, or a person of any background. That's why the police exist and what they're there for. And you don't have the right to throw a fit in a store and refuse to leave after they're closed. That's called trespassing, and you should catch a charge. The one piece of advice I would offer, that I offer to business owners and anybody who works in this kind of environment, is to have some sort of camera and audio set up so that you have a record of this kind of thing. You have proof of what happened, so that if she were to like make accusations against you publicly, or go to the media and complain about you and accuse the store of racism or anything like that, you would have hard receipts and proof that there was no racism, that the racism is not in the room with us. Because otherwise it becomes a bit of a he said, she said, and that leaves ambiguity for people to not know and to be worried that maybe you actually did do something wrong. And when you didn't, having that evidence is a huge help. But I'm sorry you've had that experience. I would encourage you and everyone else to never hold it against an entire group of people, the bad behavior of certain individuals, because it's no one's fault but that own individuals. But you still shouldn't have to deal with that kind of thing. And by all accounts, it sounds like you did exactly what I would have done. Up next, we are going to hear from somebody whose in-laws tried to emotionally blackmail him into voting for Kamala. And I can relate to this one on a personal level, but not about my in-laws. But I'll get into that. Let's take a listen.
Hey, Brad. I hope you're doing well. My name's Tim, but I promise I won't call you evil because you believe in free trade. I have a story for you today. My in-laws are your standard vote blue no matter who, and it really showed in the 2024 election with fervent support of Kamala, which brings us to my story. The week after Biden dropped out of the race and Kamala was crowned the candidate, I was dropping off my two daughters at my in-laws' house. While walking through the house, my father-in-law says to me, "I've got to be honest with you. If you're not voting for Kamala, I'm never talking to you again." Now, my wife and I have been together for 10 years. I'm used to some unhinged comments like my mother-in-law saying that Trump is going to put homosexuals in internment camps. But I wasn't going to take this, though. I shrugged my shoulders and said, well, I'm not voting for Kamala, so you do what you need to do. Finished dropping off my kids and left with a have a good one, which was met by silence. Later that day at work, I get a fairly similar text from both him and my mother-in-law, not apologizing, but with some diatribe about how democracy is at stake. I chuckled and responded to both that it's ironic they're claiming democracy is at stake when the Democrats inserted a candidate after actively quelling primary elections during the year, and you were both trying to emotionally manipulate me into voting for your candidate. Everything ended up blowing up and was fine for the rest of the year. They kind of accepted that, but it was a funny story. I figured that your audience might.
Wow. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a funny story, but it's also a horrifying one. Like, where do these people get off? The entitlement is out of control. You do not have the right to control your family members and what they can think and believe and who they can support politically. That's not how this works. And you would think that they would be a little bit more humble, because presumably having a relationship to their grandchildren is very important to them, like if they're like most people, and actively mistreating their son-in-law like this is a good way to have that relationship curtailed or limited. So, I mean, it would be totally, you would be totally within your rights to draw some kind of a boundary with them and say that, listen, if you can't treat my family respectfully, you will lose access to it. And hopefully your partner, your wife, would be on board with that, and you guys could be in unison. They don't have the right to do this. The same way you don't have the right to tell them that they have to support Trump. Yeah, they don't have the right to do that to you. And it is so funny, the gays in camps thing. I remember that from the first term. They said Pence would do that, and the memes were hilarious. It never happened, obviously. Look, I've been critical of a lot of parts of the Trump administration, but the derangement is absolutely there among some people. And even then, like, let them have their Delulu beliefs if they want. But again, you can't control others. And this one rings true to me, because I had an experience like this where my grandmother on my father's side, may she rest in peace, had breast cancer in the build up to, well, she had it for years, but she had it and then she eventually passed away from it, which is very sad. But she had it in the build up to the 2020 election. And I had not a close relationship with her, but we did talk. And she said something to the effect of me, I don't remember the exact details, but like, my last wish to you is that to ask you to vote for Biden or something, because she just couldn't live with the idea of Trump winning again. And I remember being so pissed off by that on so many levels, because it's like, you are emotionally manipulating me with your cancer diagnosis to try to control who I vote for. And I did what I always do in 2020. I voted for the Libertarian candidate. If I even voted at all, I may have skipped that year, but I didn't vote for Trump, but I also wasn't voting for Biden. And I was definitely not after she tried to do that to control me. Like, if anything, that was never going to have the intended effect. It was only going to do the opposite. But people need to be put in their place when they try these kinds of things. It is not okay to control and manipulate your family members in these kinds of unhealthy and toxic ways. And you need to stand up for yourself if they try it again, and set boundaries, because we can't tolerate this kind of behavior. It's gotten out of control, and people need to get checked on it when they try it.